They say it, and it's true, that everything is getting faster. You're not getting any younger, and time is the single resource that you can never get back or get any more of. So why walk into your local comic shop blind when you can go in laser focused on the best books on the shelf?
Hi everybody, and welcome to Minute to Skim It. Yeah!
Spend 1 hour with Miss Jen and Bean, and they'll give you rapid-fire reviews of all the new comics hitting stores. Spend less time shopping and more time reading.
This is Provenance of Secrets.
This is The Heathens. I read Wolverine number 17.
Minute to Skim It, every Tuesday at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hello and welcome to Black Comics Universe, coming to you live exclusively here on The Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and a follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week. Black Comics Universe streams live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on all DSPs, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. And as always, as soon as my show is done, please stay tuned for Miss Jen's Minute to Skim It. Right. Tonight, I am just, I don't know who that person is, but thank you. Predestination. And that looks like spam, doesn't it? Yeah, that's probably spam. Anyway, thanks for joining me tonight. I am just going to be sharing some things, sharing some comments with you guys, sharing some things, some updates that I've made to my website that I wanted to share with you, and share with you some comics that I've read this past week that I really am excited about. And you know it's a good comic when you start giving other comics a side eye. Like when a comic's so good that you look at other comics like, okay, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you, up to snuff? But first, I would just like to, as always, but more importantly, this episode, I want to invite everybody to visit my website, Black Comics Universe. It's as entertaining as it is educational, and I just wanted to share a few things on my website. That's basically how it's all set up. As you can see at the top here, I've been doing something new. I've been adding critiques, and mostly of independent comics, but I will be getting into some more comics from major publishers as well. But my critiques have been pretty interesting, and it's okay. And you might be asking, why am I calling them critiques as opposed to reviews? And I thought a long time, before I started writing these reviews, I was wondering what kind of point system I would use. And as soon as I started putting together a point system, whether it's going to be 5 stars or 10 points or percentages and all this kind of stuff, it just occurred to me that I know myself enough to know that hardly anything I read is going to get past 50, 60%. And that's just not going to look good. Or it might not get past 3.25 stars or 4 stars. It's just going to be a whole bunch of 4-star books, and that's all anybody's going to look at is those stars, right? And no one's going to really read or pay attention to the constructive criticism I give. So my reviews, quote unquote reviews, are more like critiques. I've done at least 2 of them so far. I've done one on Lumberjacks by Morgan Iverson, and I've done one on Hot Shot by my man Mike Watson. So check those out. Everybody seems to enjoy my critiques, so much so that Victor hit me up and sent me his book to critique. And anybody that knows Victor knows that that's no small feat that he sent me his book. And he told me basically to have at it. So, and I did. It's a pretty good critique, and I'll be sharing that tomorrow, New Comic Book Day. And if you're out there, if you're looking to actually have your book critiqued, send your book my way. I have a lot of books on standby here, so just be aware that it'll be a minute, but I have like 2 or 3 books that I'm in the middle of critiquing. But yeah, if you're interested in me taking a look at your book, I'll be more than happy. And but here's the thing to understand is that if I feel that your book is not ready for a critique, I'll probably let you know. And but I'll be more than willing to give you my feedback on the book, but that might cost you a little something. I don't know if I give you some a critique on a book that I don't publish, but if I don't feel like it's ready, whether it's the writing or the artwork or the way it's set up or any number of different things, if I feel like it's ready for a critique, I definitely won't leave you hanging. I'll definitely say what's up. But yeah, that's something new that's on the website, and has been getting great response. So I'm really excited about that. The other thing that's also all available on the website is my Black Comic Keys. These are things that I've discussed, me and my man Marcus, or a few other friends of mine, when I've had on a show. We talk about major books, collectible books, comics that I consider to be Black Comic Keys or important to Black comic book collectors, right? Like Blue Marvel. A few weeks ago, I did the first appearance of Monica Rambeau, the comic book Eben #1 by Larry Fuller. This past week, I was talking about my book of the week. My Black Comic Key of the week was Truth, Red, White, and Black by Robert Morales and Kyle Baker, published by Marvel Comics. And I've had it's been very interesting unpacking that book. What I learned about that book is that, okay, first off, I'm not sure where the mistake came from or how it got logged in my brain. But for some reason, I assumed that, the comic book Truth, right? It's a story about Isaiah Bradley, who is a part of an experiment during World War II, where he and people in his platoon are basically tested on with an experimental super soldier serum, right? Now, for some reason, I assumed that this whole experiment and subsequently the creation of Isaiah Bradley meant that he was the first Captain America. And I assumed that that's how he was presented, that all of those, basically this was like a Tuskegee experiment that created the super soldier serum. That's the assumption I had. And I also assumed that I'm not sure where I got that idea, But I went into doing this research into this book, and I found out that wasn't the case. That by the time you get to issue 5 and 6, they basically explained that no, Isaiah Bradley was not the first Captain America, that basically Steve Rogers is the first Captain America. And this whole thing happened sometime after Captain America was injected with the superhero serum. And this was the military's attempt at improving the formula, right? Now, so I was okay with that, which it did feel kind of odd because I couldn't quite place where I got the idea from, like where this whole idea of me thinking that Isaiah Bradley was the first Captain America. And then what's so weird is I came across that, and I shared this in a couple of Facebook groups. I shared this in Black Comic Lords, shout out to them. And someone shared with me this Wizard World magazine cover that pretty much explains where I got that idea from. And it is right now. This is this was published well before the first issue of Truth ever came out. This is Wizard magazine, and that's an illustration by the editor at the time, the editor-in-chief, Joe Quesada. They interview Alex Alonso and Robert Morales, the writer of the book, in this magazine. They talk about the debate at Marvel about whether or not they were going to, the idea of them retconning, Captain America's origin like this. And there was a lot of, debate at Marvel Studios, and there's a lot of criticism, amongst comic book fans, of course, right? But what's so weird is that eventually Kyle Baker, I found a quote from Kyle Baker that explained that no, that was never the case. He was never the first one. He was never the first Captain America. It doesn't explain not sure where this article came from, but this is part of the reason why I've always thought that he was the first, right? Oh, and of course, since I'm here by myself, you always know that Kyle is in the background lurking, and he probably would love to chime in on this since he's more of a comic book scholar than I am. But yeah, so I came across that, which was weird in and of itself. So now I'm of the belief that somewhere in the middle of the series, they decided to pull back on the idea that he was the first Captain America, and then they came up with this idea that Isaiah Bradley stole the uniform, and that which ultimately puts him in prison by the end of the series. So the whole book has this really bittersweet ending to it. Like he suffers from Alzheimer's and all this kind of stuff due to the soldier serum, the experimental soldier serum that they give him, right? And you would think that was that. But then I came across this book. This is Captain America, Marvel Knights, Captain America issue 28. So what I also learned was that Robert Morales, the writer of Truth, also did a short run from issues 21 to 28 of Captain America. His series was cut short by about 10 issues. And if you ever happen to come across this book or read this book, you'll see that basically he's trying to scuttle the ship with this issue. This is a horrible comic. It's a horrible read. And it's the craziest story about the so-called daughter of Isaiah Bradley shows up in the 616 Marvel Universe from an alternate timeline, right? And from this in this timeline, Isaiah Bradley was Captain America, but he was also president of the United States. And he comes into this, and so the daughter comes into this universe and commits this terrorist attack using Stark technology and a whole bunch of Kree technology that in her universe happen to be toys. She brings it into this universe and does all this crazy stuff. It's bananas, this story in this comic book. But there's this weird page where Steve Rogers is having a conversation with the alternate universe Isaiah Bradley. And that Bradley character says that, this is the first time I'm coming across another Captain America in an alternate universe. And Steve Rogers, 616 Steve Rogers says, you are the first Captain America in this universe. Right. He says in his book that basically Steve Rogers in this comic book confirms that Isaiah Bradley is the first Captain America. And now I don't know what to think. Because what's even crazier is by the time you get to the end of this book, I'm not even sure what timeline this Steve Rogers is even in anymore. There's flying cars and everything on the very last page of this book. And it seems like Robert Morales was just like, threw up the bird and was out of there. But it's been one of the wildest Black comic keys I have come across in a very long time. If anybody has some insight into that storyline or what that was all about, I would love to hear it. Or if you have any suggested Black comic keys that I should be taking a look at and doing some research on, I would love for you guys to share in the comments or whatnot. But yeah, that's basically what I've been up to lately. I guess Kyle can't help me with this one.
Sorry, I was running back. I had to go use the little producer's room.
Oh, no problem.
What's up?
Did you hear what I was? No, what I was talking about.
I literally came through the door and heard, I guess Kyle can't help me with this one.
No, what it is I was talking about Isaiah Bradley, the Black Captain America, right? And I was talking about how I had assumed that he was the first Captain America. And I was trying to figure out where I got that idea from. And I got that idea from this magazine cover, which obviously was a mistake. This is before the book came out, but by the time you get to the end of the series, they explain that no, Isaiah Bradley was not the first Black Captain America.
Well,
right?
Chronologically, when was Isaiah Bradley Captain America versus when was, you know what I mean? Like,
chronologically, Steve Rogers, supposedly in the series, chronologically, Steve Rogers is first.
So Steve Rogers gets a super soldier serum somewhere in the 1940s to go fight in World War II.
Right. He gets it somewhere before Pearl Harbor is what it suggests. In the series.
No, I don't believe that's right, because the U.S. was already involved in World War II, thus the invention of the super soldier serum to make super soldiers for World War II. So the U.S. historically wasn't involved with World War II before Pearl Harbor, because we had this whole thing, and we can get into that later. But that's a whole other history lesson with Kyle. But the question is, when did Isaiah Bradley get the super soldier serum?
So here's a quote from Kyle Baker, basically, right? This was a part of my. I'll put my. So basically, here's a quote from Kyle Baker towards the end of my. So if you check out my website, I did not a ton of research. I'm not a anthropologist here, but basically I found this quote that basically says, with Captain America, people get on my case for changing Captain America. We got a lot of grief from the Captain America fans on that series until the 5th and 6th issue came out, when it turned out that we didn't tinker with the continuity. Before that, everybody was very upset because our story started with Pearl Harbor. And everybody knows that the first issue of Captain America took place before Pearl Harbor. Somewhere in the middle of the series, it's revealed that already existed, and we had to tinker with the timeline, and suddenly the book is okay. So, which would sort of suggest that somewhere in the middle of this series, they basically pulled back on the idea that Isaiah Bradley was supposed to be the first Captain America. That all this testing on these black soldiers took place before the first Captain America ever existed. But in this article, that's what they suggested. In the Wizard article, they suggest that he was before Captain America. So, which is bananas. And then after this whole thing about him not being the first Captain America, then I found this comic book written by Robert Morales where he suggests that he is the first Captain America. So I don't know what to think.
Well, and the other thing you got to remember is that just because he took the super soldier serum doesn't make him Captain America, right? So, like, we're talking about someone assuming a title.
Right.
And so it's one of those things was he the first person to survive being given the super soldier serum? It's entirely possible, based on what I'm reading as fast as I can read while we talk, that that Isaiah Bradley would be the first person to survive having been given the serum, which would technically make him the first super soldier. But the title of Captain America is like, being called Grand Poobah of the Water Buffalo. Like, it's a title you get given, not something that just is inherent.
No, they're suggesting that Steve Rogers survived first. He survived before Isaiah Bradley.
So Wikipedia is very divided on this, as is Marvel fandom. So it's one of those things. Is I think what you're probably dealing with is kind of a similar timeline sort of thing, right? They're getting the super soldier serum approximately the same time from two different people. It's not the same people doing the administration. So who was first and who was second?
What I think happened is that originally they wanted to make Isaiah Bradley first. And once they got a lot of flack for it, they pulled back. But they made it so... But they made the whole thing so confusing that if you're a fan of Isaiah Bradley being first, you're still going to buy the book.
Well,
assuming that.
The other problem...
If you don't like that idea, you'll pull back on your criticism because you assume that Steve Rogers is still the first one. So it's sort of like there's enough confusion there that you can land on either side of the fence, so to speak.
So the other problem is this, right? That Truth came out in 2002.
Right.
Captain America, the first appearance of Captain America was in the 1940s.
Right.
1950, was far enough back that anything you're writing in 2002, you could just be like, oh, this is where I want to slot it into the timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by saying that he is the first Captain America, they're jumping the line. They you can't really argue for or against it because Truth came after. So does Truth, the story in Truth, happen before or after the first appearance of Captain America in the Marvel timeline? And
they're saying it does.
Before or after?
After.
But because of the way it's written, if this says it's first, if the story of Truth says, oh, this is the first time anyone's ever survived the super soldier serum. I've not read the series. I don't know.
No, the book doesn't. It's this article that suggests that.
Well, Wizard Magazine is defunct for a reason. But
this is like, and this article came out before the actual even first issue of the series even came out.
Right. So if Truth leaves it purposefully vague, they're not trying to decide for you. You make that decision.
I think it's not so much as that it's vague, that as much as it is sort of like, again, like sort of like this, the book isn't vague, but you could tell like the book had been sort of like, you could tell that they moved some things around. You know what I mean? I think that by the time the way the ending of the series goes, it's sort of like you could tell, you can always tell when the editor has come in to, fix a story that they don't necessarily, think is moving in the right direction. So that's the impression that I get, in
The
all
other
of this.
the other interesting thing is you have a 61-year gap in canon, right?
Mhm.
Between Truth and first appearance of Captain America. In 61 years, Captain America's origin story had changed 3 or 4 times.
Mhm.
These things have been fluid since the beginning as to who is what and when. And so to say definitively who's first or who's second, there would have to be a book written that says this is how it went down. And that book doesn't exist. Right? You'd have to come up with, someone would have to establish canon that says, okay, we recognize that both of these people are considered Captain America, the first Captain America, but here's what actually happened. So it'd have to be yet another to be published book or to be published story. Otherwise, it becomes, okay, I am not a fan of. I'll just tell this story. I'm not a huge fan of the way they introduced Bucky Barnes. So my headcanon is a different origin story for Bucky Barnes. Right? So they're letting you establish your own headcanon. And then eventually, maybe someday, they'll come out with a book that says, oh, well, in one room, Steve Rogers was getting the injection, and in the other room, Isaiah Bradley was getting the injection. And this is who actually became Captain America first.
Well, if you think about the fact that now, here's a interesting point that I didn't bring up yet. That I'm trying to think, when did the first Captain America movie come out?
Oh Lord,
That had to be like what, first 2000 something.
I don't even know. I try not to remember those things. I can remember that Captain America came out in 1941, but I can't remember when the movie came out.
2011. So almost 10 years before the first movie comes out, right? This book is released. And if you think about it, aside from the movie release itself, this book is probably one of the biggest things that happened to Captain America in decades. Like, no one really, before, like, and then, well, after this, they keep doing more and more things to Captain America to make him relevant. Like, they turn him into a Nazi or whatever. They, they do all these things. They
never did, by the way.
Well, you know what I mean. It's sort of like all the controversy around him being a part of, what's the name? Being part of
Hydra.
Right.
But so I will say this though, like, I collected Captain America for a long time. I never collected this book.
No.
Didn't care. Because it wasn't Steve Rogers, right? So there's a level of 10 years later, to say that Truth was the biggest thing to have happened to Captain America is maybe a little misconception, because they killed Captain America twice. Like, and then he became Nomad once, and there was all this other stuff. So as a Captain America collector, Truth wasn't even on the radar until they started opening up the universe to things like the multiverse and to things like, was Steve Rogers really the first Cap? And these questions started coming up again with the possibility of alternate timelines in the last 8 to 10 years. Right? This book has become way more important in the last 8 to 10 years than it was in the first 8 to 10 years of its life. In terms of the general collectorship, like as a as a comic work, it was always important. Don't get me wrong, but like average Joe Blow on the street had no idea what this book was, right? And in the last 8 to 10 years, because of Marvel's expansion into everything you think you know isn't what you actually know. And I will go back to the starting of Steve Rogers as a part of Hydra. You might not know what you think you know. That's when this book and other books like it started to really tick up and become super important.
Possibly, because I mean, it wasn't like, it's not like this book is not a they didn't mess with the timeline, but it's still a part of the six. It is a part of continuity enough to be considered, it's not a multiverse story.
Right. But what happened? So see, this is why me hating the movies is always a problem. Right. Marvel spent so many years going, hey, this is what the 616 universe is. This is very specifically what the 616 universe. Tony Stark looks vaguely like that guy that used to be on Ally McBeal, and Steve Rogers looks vaguely like that guy who used to be Silver Surfer. And, they spent so many years painting the lines in that when they started alluding to, with the first Guardians movie, Thanos and some of these things, that the universe was much bigger than the world they had painted it into. Between Iron Man 1 and Guardians 1, that characters like Isaiah Bradley, there weren't really room to breathe in the world. It was all about, okay, this character is in a movie now. And then they started alluding to these other characters that hadn't been as relevant, and now these books start to expand as the 616 universe starts to expand. And now they're getting into the multiversal thing, where was Captain America in 616 really the first Captain America? Was Isaiah Bradley the first Captain America? Or was there something beyond that out in the multiverse? So it's one of those things, is that and I'm talking about the average collector. I'm not talking about somebody who goes out there like you or I do for very specific things. I think this book has become more and more popular and more important since the average collector figured out what it was. And that's in the last half dozen years.
Oh, well, see, that's the whole idea of this show specifically, because the vast majority of these, what I consider to be black keys, are all becoming more relevant now than ever did before. Like,
right.
This copy of Truth. Oh, we got some spam. Yay. This copy of Truth that I have cost me $10 that I got, and I picked that up, several, not too long ago, less than a year ago. Cost me like $12 or something like that. And I'm fairly certain I'll never be able to find a copy that cheap anytime soon. It would be closer to $50 raw, right? So yeah, and this would be, of course, this is after the show, which now I need to go back and I can't recall how they presented Bradley in the show. Like, it's like now I have to pay attention to how they presented him in the show, because now I'm starting to vaguely remember that they might have introduced him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as the first. So I don't recall. So now I got to take a look and see, which would basically dig this hole even deeper.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing about these. I'll make another analogy to you. There was a character that debuted in Boba Fett this last episode. Right. That only exists to Star Wars fans if you were a fan of the extended universe prior to Disney's acquisition of Star Wars. right?
Mhm.
So there are a whole bunch of people who are going out there and digging real deep holes on who is this character and why is this character relevant, and it's
Mhm.
driving the value of the book through the roof, but the value of his first appearance through the roof. But the rest of us are going, we've been looking at this book for like 10 years now. Like, where
Mhm.
y'all been? And so that's what happened with Truth for sure, is
Mhm.
that when he hit in the Falcon Winter Soldier show,
Yeah.
all of a sudden a bunch of people who dug the hole, raised the price way up, and made it essentially so that this book is no longer gettable, which is why the speculation market is not great. Like,
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to feel like, I don't know how to explain it. It's been very interesting lately because I came into this as a collector, specifically looking at Black comics, um, and I know that the idea was I came with a few assumptions. That one, that a lot of these books were going to be rare because it was going to be small, short print runs on some of these books. That I knew that some of these books will be fairly cheap because if they did have copies, they might be in dollar bins and stuff like that, and none of them will be major keys, right? But of course, um, I did not um, uh, think about the impact that the movies have on all those books, and the television shows. Disney Plus has on the effect that the effect that all of that has on those books,
mm-hmm.
and but also the more that the more it feels like, also the more we have these conversations and the more I communicate with other collectors, Black collectors, now I'm starting to see eBay sellers, now that they know that there's an interest, they are hiking up the prices on certain books.
Right. I mean,
So
so let me ask you this question.
yeah.
Would you have wanted to collect Truth regardless of anything that happened on television?
Oh yeah. I got the book. I got Truth well before the show came out.
Right. You
And I
wanted to
had a short
collect.
list. There's a short list of books like Truth. Um even even Far Sector. Was
Right.
on-
Right. You wanted to
Um
collect these shows regardless of what happened in terms of the
right.
pop culture ramifications.
It's out of pop
There.
culture, regardless of how well they were doing as far as CGC and all this other kind of stuff. As
Right.
far as any of those concerns, I wouldn't want to get my hands on
Right.
those books. Right.
The speculative market that people like me have been ranting and raving about for years now
Mm-hmm.
makes it so people like you who want to collect the book regardless either have to pay so much money it becomes prohibitive
Mm-hmm.
or can't.
Right.
And so that's why when I talk about collect what you love, like I mean it in that very serious level of
Right.
don't just go out and buy this book because you think it's going to be worth dough.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's one of the biggest things I've learned, is that once I realized that there were different types of collectors,
mhm,
that's when I started to understand um, why certain websites present the information that they present,
yep,
or like the fact that a lot of the books that I'm even hunting don't even show up on a lot of the most popular apps and stuff like that,
mhm,
or like the prices are skewed, right? So
right,
like for instance, um, I have Key Collector and Comic Book Pricing Guide on my phone, right?
mhm,
Um, for a certain book that I'm looking for, the average a 9.6 would go for, a graded copy would go for like say 100 some bucks on average, but you could get it raw for like 20, 30 some bucks, right? But then I'm looking on eBay and it's sort of like now that sellers see that there's interest, that same book, good book is going for $200-300 all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to like just sit back and wait for the market to calm down before I actually look and actually purchase a book.
Right.
Like a perfect example, and this is like one of the goofiest books ever, is that somebody I follow on Facebook have been raving for weeks about Meteor Man, right? The Robert Townsend movie.
Yep.
That was a Marvel comic.
And the movie was not great.
No, it was this corny B movie. I don't even think like nobody took it seriously, even Robert Townsend. It was just like this silly, goofy movie.
Do you remember, real quick, do you remember Robert Townsend being in a Disney Channel superhero movie?
No.
He was in a Disney Channel original superhero movie, and I can't for the life of me think of it. And I think Disney Channel has disowned it because I can't find it on their app. So I'm trying.
It might be Meteor Man. Like
no, it isn't Meteor Man. It's like the whole family are superheroes.
Oh, I think I know you're talking about. It might not be, but I vaguely remember. But yeah, it's like my man Richard's in here. He says the spec market is a necessary evil. It kills new collector recruitment, but it is what it is, and he's right. It does.
I disagree with the statement that it's a necessary evil. It is something we have to live with.
Yeah,
but it's not a necessary evil. It's an
evil.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I'll put it like this: when you coming into comic collecting, you need to understand the type of collector you're going to be. If you're the collector, I don't think if you're the type of collector that's looking to actually earn a living doing this, then yes, eBay is necessary and all these other sites are necessary because this is how you can measure, the value of your collection in terms of flipping books, right? Mm-hmm. So if your goal is to make, quote unquote, your hobby pay for itself, then you need something like eBay to help, point you in somewhere in the right direction. But you do need some understanding of the books you're reading to understand some of those prices, because I'm seeing it's like I used to go into this thinking, well, that's the price. That's where it is right now. I'm just going to have to save up for it. But then I'm starting to look at it and it's like no longer than like maybe I give it 2 or 3 weeks, maybe like a couple months for a book. And I'll immediately start to see when that book cools down, it's like a totally different story. And so, but if you don't have the patience or the information, you can definitely find yourself stuck. My man Richard back.
One of the things I just wanted to mention on that, right, is that, when they say such and such a product went into development, right. Well, anybody who's been around that knows that development takes years.
True.
It takes forever. Stuff rarely gets put in development in 2022 and is out by 2023. It just doesn't happen that way. So these books skyrocket.
Yeah.
Because a development announcement was made, and then these books skyrocket, and the rest of us are left holding the bag going, wait a minute, I want to get into this and read this before it comes out. And now the book is so high you can't get it. So then, like you said, you got to wait. And you wait 5-6 months, and these books are back down maybe 10% higher than they were when it started. But they're back down to normal.
Reasonable prices, right?
And Richard, again, I disagree when you say interest is created by speculation. Interest is created by interesting things happening. If the interesting thing is speculation, then you're absolutely correct. If the interesting thing is a development deal or a new film or the reintroduction of a character or the repackage of a character, or hell, I've seen books get hot because a new action figure comes out.
Well, what's interesting is like it depends on who we're talking about, right? Like I've noticed that anything Tinian touches goes through the roof, right? And I think that's both, and it's partly good writing. It's also the hype around him
Mhm.
in terms of practically everything that he's written has all been optioned for something. So like now, speculators, whenever Tinian does anything, speculators are all over that book, right? So by the time, so it doesn't, so it might have been interest, it might have been more organic interest when he was first, when he wrote his first Batman or was presenting some of these new characters in Batman. But by the time you get to um, the House on the Lake book, it's
Right.
like it's all hype by then, right?
And
That's all speculation.
that book, by the way, the House on the Lake book, is real good.
I'm not, I'm not
Like,
saying it's bad. I'm just saying
that's
that
the thing about a creator like Tinian, right? The speculation comes
right.
because he's creating good product. Like, it's not a if then statement. It can be a then because of,
I think it's both because
Yeah.
I'll be. It's like, yeah, people are reading that book, but at the same time, there's so much speculation around it.
Right.
It's like,
But
so it's
that's why I say speculation interest is created by interesting things happening. And sometimes that interest is speculation, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's always happened in this industry. Even in the early 2000s, after the things fell out in the 90s, right? And when speculation was at its highest in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Even after things fell out, there was still speculation around, oh, this character's getting a new costume. Maybe that'll be the thing to make it take off. Or they're killing Superman and he's coming back. Maybe the new look of Superman will be better. Or there's always been speculation.
Yeah.
It's speculation is based on something interesting happening to the character, not necessarily, or interest is based on something interesting happening. And sometimes that's speculation, sometimes it's something else, and sometimes that something else sparks the speculation. So it's not necessarily, it's not a necessary evil. It's just necessary. You have to know how to handle it and know how to maneuver around it. But right now, the speculation market is the biggest hindrance to creation of product for consumer, for long-term collector. You can't create product and go after the long-term collector anymore. You have to create product to go after the get as much out of it as you can right this second market.
I see what you're saying. And there's a lot of that, which would explain this whole thing about killing the Justice League and basically rebooting the whole DC lineup again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what that is. It's sort of like, because that's what will happen is, this is just a perfect point because I see this a lot. So like all the, a lot of Black collectors have been enjoying what DC has been doing with, say, for instance, Black Manta, with Aquaman, with Batman, all these interesting storylines, and it happens like clockwork every single time. It's like as soon as like we really get into the stride of those books, Nubia, and now they're about to reboot it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what makes the cut with this next reboot. But we all know how this works. This is a way to basically refresh old traditional characters again. Because the thing to remember is, which is sad, there was a time where these superheroes, these characters were just that. They were characters. They were people. The thing to understand now is all of these names, these are all brands now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you can't get attached to any of these characters as much as you used to anymore, because as soon as when the market dips and when they have to basically, It reminds me of that scene from Training Day, right? Do you remember that movie, Training Day? They needed to get the money that this guy that they had on house arrest was sitting on. And in order to get to the money, they basically had to fake a raid on this dude's house. And they had to kill this dude that they were supposedly friends with. They had to kill this dude to make it look legit so that they get the money. And it almost feels like that's what they do to Marvel and DC characters every 5 or 6 years. They basically say, yo, we need another $200 million out of this franchise. We're gonna have to, knock you off, Superman, or you're gonna have to die,
But what's interesting is how often that fails.
It practically fails every single time, but it never stops them from doing it.
You want to know what you want to know something interesting that just occurs to me?
What's that?
One of the things that classifies someone as a terrorist is how high their failure rate is. Right? Most of the time, terrorists fail at achieving what they are almost 100% of the time. Terrorists fail at achieving what they're trying to achieve, like in getting their message across or, gaining support for their cause. It almost always goes the opposite way.
Wow.
It's the same thing with rebooting superheroes. It almost always fails.
Yeah. So they're terrorists.
So, I'm not saying.
To a degree, it's like they're doing it. Think about it. The next storyline, this whole crisis. It's almost like they're trying to, they create shock and awe.
Right.
Shock and awe there, right? A whole bunch of casualties.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get to the, after the smoke clears.
Right. And nobody ever stays dead. So it's like they realize that it didn't work and then they bring them all back.
Yeah, that's wild, bro.
So I got one for you. I know it's a little off topic, but I got one for you.
All right, shoot.
I'm watching this show called Fast Foodies on True TV the other night.
Fast Foodies?
Yes. It's a show where they have these like gourmet cooks replicate fast food dishes like in a competition setting. But that's not what's important. I'm watching it on True TV, and the first ad, the top ad in the first break of the show is for Milestone Media.
Wow.
You've been talking to me about Milestone Media now for the better part of a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching it going, this is huge. Like, they're on pay cable. Like,
what was the commercial? Is that I think there was an AT&T commercial or something like that.
I have no idea, but I just know, like, I'll be honest, I was kind of Googling how to make what they were trying to recreate because I wanted to make it. I was feeling a crispy chicken sandwich at the moment.
Right.
But so I only caught the DC Milestone logo, Milestone Initiative or whatever, Milestone Media Initiative.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Ad. Like, I don't know what all was involved in that, but I just remember sitting there going, holy crap, I think Imani's a prophet.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of indie creators I know entered into that Milestone Initiatives. They didn't make it, but they've been sharing their scripts and their experience. So it's been an interesting few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, and why wouldn't you, right? Like, if you could, why wouldn't you try and get in on it?
Yeah, they tried. But I'm very interested to see who they choose. So that should be coming up pretty soon here.
I have a question. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. If you entered that, right, you sent in a script. If it didn't get chosen, do you get the rights to that script or are you out?
Well, the scripts had to feature their characters, so I would imagine that it don't.
But let's just say Mike wrote a script and sent it in, Mike Watson. Could he bring that back and develop it for Hot Shot? That same story? Like, does he own the rights to that story? I don't know. I didn't know if you knew.
I don't know about this. I mean, assuming he doesn't own the rights to the characters, but they were. But
he could swap out. What I'm saying is he could swap in his characters.
Maybe no, because I will say this: the way they created the prompt, you had to write write and actually draw to specifically what they sent you. So if you were writing a script, you had to basically write a script around the story they sent you. You had to, if you were drawing, you had to draw an 8-page story based on the script they sent you. So technically, they already own the rights to the prompts and the stories that they sent you. So it wouldn't help to swap out anything because technically you basically, that part of it will be hard to.
That had me real excited though, is these guys going out and laying out all their craziest ideas, like their wildest, trying to get in on it. And now it's, I'll just take it back to my creator own story and tell it there.
Right. I mean, it's possible. But yeah, like it's weird the way they presented it.
Yeah. And
it's such an old school approach because at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of indie people actually get into the, into Marvel and DC without having to do all this. So, I mean, talent, that's how talent works anyway. So I'm not sure how this initiative thing was going to pan out anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, it stopped me dead in my tracks trying to find a recipe for a crispy chicken sandwich to rival Wendy's. And,
I'm a prophet, Kyle. You're right.
So
yeah. Lateef in drop. Whatever. Imani Damis.
That'll work.
Nostradamus. Imani Nadamis.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. I'm about to almost ran out of time on that bad boy. All right. I appreciate you all tuning in. I'm about to head out. Please check out blackcomicsuniverse.com. Please subscribe to our newsletter from our website, blackcomicsuniverse.com. And you can follow us on all social media, Black Comics Universe. All right. And I appreciate your time, and I am out.